I'm gonna kill all the men that betray me.
They will eat you alive. It's not enough to be as good as a man. You have to be twice as ruthless.
Layer cake meets The Only Way is Essex. That's how best to describe this film, at least in my opinion. If you're outside of the UK, you may not know those references, but if you're in the UK, then I think you'll agree. So, Duchess is the latest movie by Neil Marshall. Marshall, of course, most famous for directing Dog Soldiers, The Descent, and various TV shows like some of the big action episodes from Game of Thrones. And this one stars Charlotte Kirk, who is actually Neil Marshall's real-life girlfriend, and he's made a couple of films with her previous to this. This is the third one, I believe. And this has got a pretty good supporting cast here. Stephanie Beachum, Philip Winchester, Colm, Meaney, to name but a few here. And it's effectively a kind of action crime revenge thriller. So what is the story? So Kirk plays a character called Scarlett, who is a pickpocket by trade, and she meets Philip Winchester's character, who is a professional diamond smuggler, and these two kind of hit it off and have a bit of a romance, and she ultimately accepts him for his kind of criminal activities. Inevitably, she kind of gets involved in this, and at a certain point in the movie, we have a kind of a paradigm shift in regards to somewhat of a power play, and Scarlett's character, who is dubbed Duchess, kind of has to sort of take the reins ultimately, and in a violent, bloody fashion. So that's all I'll say on the plot there. So let's discuss what I think works about this movie. So it is a fun movie. It's a cheesy movie. I'll come on to that again, but it is somewhat of a kind of high-octane, explosive action movie. You know, it's a little bit dumb, but yes, it's a kind of a fun one to watch. And I have to say, I think this is partly due to some good characters. Now, Sean Pertwee also stars in this movie, who of course has worked with Neil Marshall in Dog Soldiers. And he plays kind of a right-hand man to Philip Winchester's sort of character. And there's a couple of other ones as well. And I just thought these characters were quite fun. Yes, they're kind of criminals, they're underworld types, but the kind of the interplay between the characters, and obviously Neil Marshall has done some great work. The Descent was regarded as one of the best horror movies, partly because of the characters that were kind of created in that movie. And I think the character work here is fairly sort of strong. I mean, they're a bit cliche, but yeah, I still, nonetheless, the character work for at least some of the characters. I mean, there's quite a big cast in this movie, but the ones we kind of get to know the most, I think, certainly have a kind of a great interplay. This movie's somewhat kind of over the top, but I think it kind of benefits it. You can't really expect to watch this as a sort of gritty crime drama. I mean, Philip Winchester's diamond smuggler character has a house with a tiger pit in it, so he literally throws his his foes into this pit of tiger where there's a tiger who gets eats them alive. So it's like a real James Bond villain sort of stuff. So there's lots of kind of like over the top silliness to it, but it adds to that fun element. So if you're wanting a movie which does have more of a hyper reality, more of a kind of just a balls out action film, then this is definitely that rather than a kind of gritty, realistic crime drama. Once the movie gets going, it's pretty non-stop in regards to its kind of action set pieces, and although I wouldn't say this movie is outstanding with any singular kind of action set piece, it's pretty consistent with kind of gunfights and fist fights through the movie, so it never kind of slows down once we kind of get past the sort of the first act from that point. Now, Charlotte Kirk's character Scarlet, I have to be honest with you, I didn't warm to the character first of all. But once the kind of the plot starts in earnest and we kind of get it kind of kicks into overdrive with more of the violent sort of style storyline, I kind of got into the character a little bit more, I have to say. But it took me a little while. But nonetheless, I have to say I think this is probably at the 3 movies that Neil Marshall has done with Charlotte Kirk, and she co-wrote this. I think this is the one I've enjoyed the most. You know, it has a decent production value. There is kind of quite a lot of quite a large cast, and I quite like some of the kind of the stylistic choices, albeit we've sort of seen it sometime before in certain gangster films, you know, where we have a little kind of title card comes up when we're introduced to a new character, and then we get a kind of a little bit of a voiceover giving us the background and stuff like this. So that, you know, it's fun, but it's not something necessarily original. Stephanie Beachum's character I have to give a special mention to, though, who I thought was wonderful, and she plays this kind of like higher up, like gangster boss, and you know, I just thought she was a wonderful character. You know, to be honest, she doesn't have a huge amount of screen time, but when she is on screen, I think she's worth every penny that they paid to have her on there. I have to say. You know, it's a fun movie. It is dumb. Don't expect it to be too deep, I would say. It does have a romantic angle to it. The underpinning of this movie is the relationship between, you know, Philip Winchester's character and Charlotte Kirk's character. And that is the driving force of this whole movie. So it's kind of like somewhat of an Essex Girls romantic fantasy is the best way I would describe it. Again, you may not know that reference, but hopefully you do. What doesn't work in this movie, like I said, it's going to be a little bit of a taste thing. It's somewhat over the top because it's not exactly tried to be a realistic sort of drama. It does border on being quite cheesy at times. And kind of a little bit unbelievable in regards to some of the kind of the silliness that we have on screen. One other critique I would say is the motivation for antagonists seems really unclear. They give a motivation, they actually say why it is they're doing certain things, and I won't say who the antagonists are necessarily, but it didn't make any sense to me at all, because they say, oh, things have changed because of X, and have they? I didn't really think they did. I mean, how have they changed? It just didn't make any sense at all. So to me, that plot point really needs to be expanded upon because it just didn't make a lick of sense, if you ask me. Charlotte Kirk, I have to be honest with you, I don't think is the strongest actor, and I would say she struggles a little bit in the first act of this movie, and that is where most of the kind of the drama scenes are, the kind of the dramatic sequences. But when it's a little bit more, you know, the dialogue is a little cut down, you know, and it's more of an action-based movie for maybe the second 2 acts. I think she, you know, is fairly good. I mean, she's doesn't do a bad performance. I just don't think it's comparable when you kind of putting her next to, like, you know, Stephanie Beachum, Colm Meaney and the like. You know, it's kind of like you can kind of see maybe the difference between the experience, should we call it. There are some plot points where I felt really needed to be expanded upon. Now, I'm going to have to be vague here because I don't want to give any sort of plot points away. But about halfway through the movie, we're introduced to a kind of group of criminals that are also connected to Philip Winchester's character. We see he's got his 2 main guys, and then we're introduced to a sort of, I think it's like 4 other guys. And this is his kind of group that is outside of the UK. And one of them is this character called Tom, who we are told is his best friend that he's known for like all his life, and they're the closest. And, you know, he plays a kind of a significant role in the latter half of the film. But I thought the first half of the film, we didn't even know this character existed. And I felt like that relationship should have at least been introduced. Because it kind of feels like it's quite an important relationship in regards to the film, and it wasn't set up. And it's like, yeah, this guy, massive impact on my life. Never mentioned him before. But yeah, just trust me, he is this, like, my best friend in the entire world. It's like, well, I feel that should have been established more, because he does play a pivotal role in the movie. So there kind of is that. And then the action set pieces, as I've mentioned, I think they're not bad necessarily, but there's nothing really outstanding. And there's a few instances where we have bad guys just standing out in the open, firing a gun, and then they end up getting shot. And it's like, what do you expect to happen? But overall, I think despite some flaws, I think this is still a fun movie. I quite enjoyed it. You know, if you can get over the first act, which I have to be honest, I think is the weakest, and once you get into the full-on action side of stuff, then it really picks up, and I think it, you know, it held my attention a lot more than the setup. So maybe the setup could have been a little better. I'll give this one a 6 out of 10, an above average score, but nothing sort of too memorable necessarily, but certainly I would say worth your time if you like an action film. And obviously Neil Marshall, a capable director, and you know, we'll see where he goes from here. 6 out of 10, would you watch this one? Have you seen it? Please do let me know, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.